Sure it is. Sure it is. The question is to what degree? Already Israeli businessmen, Saudi businessmen have lots of contacts. And basically the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain probably wouldn't have signed the Abraham Accords without a very bright green light from Saudi Arabia. The question is whether Saudi Arabia can jump into the same degree that the UAE and Bahrain did in Morocco in the Abraham Accords by opening embassies. Keep in mind that the Saudis are the custodians of the two holiest cities in Islam, Mecca and Medina. That definitely exercises a certain restraining power on their diplomacy vis-a-vis Israel. But in the background of all of this visit is looming, yes, the Ukraine crisis and the need for the United States for the Saudis to ramp up oil production so that the United States and the West can wean itself of Russian energy sources. And beyond that, the looming confrontation with Iran as Iran proceeds to rush or toward nuclear military capabilities.
Well, certainly where my next thoughts take us here. I mean, President Biden, he sort of came in with a tough stance on the Saudis here. Has the president seemingly realized that he needs to keep his Gulf allies close in order to counter Iran? And on top of that, is the new diplomacy issue seemingly dead in the water right now?
Well, it could be seemingly dead in the water. I think the Europeans are still trying desperately to revive it. The big issue there is whether the signatories to the renewed JCPOA, the renewed nuclear deal, would agree to the delisting of the Islamic Revolutionary Guards from the list of terrorist organizations. And I say it is listed as such in the United States. The United States has balked that demand, at least with the caveat of saying if the Iranians want to discuss the delisting of the IRGC, it has to be willing to discuss all issues that are non-nuclear related, i.e., Iran's support for terror around the Middle East, its attempts to destroy the state of Israel, et cetera. The Iranians have balked at that, and that has led to a deadlock. I think the Europeans are trying to find a middle ground where the United States would delist the military wing of the IRGC, the Al-Quds Force, but delist the non-military wing of the IRGC. IRGC is a very big organization. It has its own economy and its own military apparatus. So there's a compromise out there. It could happen. Whether it's going to happen, to my mind right now, seems unlikely. Okay. And I think that is what is precipitating, in large measure, the president's visit to Saudi Arabia to shore up a Middle East alliance should Iran break out and create a nuclear weapon.
Changing direction a little bit here, staying with the president's trip. Now, we saw high-level U.S. officials in Ramallah this week, meeting with President Abbas, seeming to lay the groundwork for a meeting with the president, likely coming up during this visit. Now, the reports indicate that despite the return of hundreds of millions of dollars that this administration has put back into the Palestinian Authority, that they're still, or already, I should say, upset with this administration. What is the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, what are they trying to accomplish?
Extraordinary. And the Palestinians are upset with the American president. there's an unusual development. They're upset because the United States has not moved forward on its pledge to reopen the U.S. consulate in East Jerusalem. For many, many years, that consulate served as the de facto American embassy to the Palestinians. The consul general in that building did not report to America's ambassador to Israel. He reported directly to the State Department. Now, the United States is trying to do a sort of an end around, fix it for that pledge. It's actually appointed an individual who will report directly to the State Department, not to the American ambassador in Jerusalem on Palestinian affairs. The Palestinians are not satisfied with that. They want the actual building, which they see as representing America's commitment to make East Jerusalem someday the capital of an independent Palestinian state.
Like I said, this is for the same reason that Israel is pushing back on that issue. But on the Israeli side, this upcoming visit, where does this go? What is Israel looking to gain from this president's visit at this point?
I think Israel's probably looking to get through it peacefully. Certainly this government, which is already teetering, it wouldn't take very much to push it over the edge. For example, if the president comes to Jerusalem, he may visit the Western Wall, something that no Democratic president has ever done, visit the Western Wall. But at the same time, he may visit a Palestinian hospital in East Jerusalem. And that could precipitate a coalition crisis, a defection of further right-wing members of the coalition to the opposition led by Benjamin Netanyahu, the fall of the government. I think that initially, I think the impetus behind the trip, at least partially, was for the president to play the same role vis-a-vis Naftali Bennett, the prime minister, that Donald Trump played vis-a-vis Netanyahu, to strengthen his hand, to show that the United States stands foursquare behind this current prime minister. I think it's a little bit late in the day for that.
Yeah, feels like it.
And there's a chance even that the president will show up here and there won't be a prime minister.
Yes, that, I hate to say, seems like even one of the likeliest scenarios at this point. You seem like the perfect. I have another question for you, not related to the president's visit, at least I don't think so, that you came to mind as perhaps a very good person to give us an answer on this. There's been reports recently in Israel that Israelis are now waiting up to a year to get U.S. tourist visas right now. Why is this happening still in 2022 to Israelis?
Well, there's a technical reason. That is that the United States and the State Department have not recovered from Corona, and there's a tremendous backlog. And they're working very hard to rectify it, but it just is the backlog. I know people are calling me all the time and trying to say, can you help me get a visa? It's very difficult, sometimes very painful, unless there's a medical emergency. But generally speaking, David, it has to do with America's policy toward the whole visa issue in Israel. It's based on three issues. I hope I have time to explain all three. One of them has to do with the number of refusals. Okay. If 3% or less of Israelis who apply for visas are refused, then there's a chance that they could lift the visa application. But we have been over 3 for a very long time. During the Obama years, we were up around 10% refusals. The second issue has to do with biotechnical chips in our passports. We've done that. Most of our passports do have those chips in them. And the third issue, which is the thorniest issue, has to do with Palestinian Americans who want to visit Judea and Samaria, the West Bank, but according to the Oslo Accords, have to do so by flying through Jordan. America signed on that, but now they've started backtracking on it and saying that that's a discriminatory policy, and they want Palestinian Americans to be able to fly through Ben Gurion Airport to visit the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Our security forces object to that.
Well, it's all sensible explanations. Appreciate you for joining us to give that authority to it. It's a question that at least was on our mind, among all the others we discussed here. Ambassador Michael Oren, thank you very much for being with us.
Good day, David. Bye-bye.